Hello. Today I want to talk on a wide ranging issues. But I would do that under the title African the New World Order. Um, I would cite some recent events that have been happening, particularly with the United States, President Trump's administration, second administration, and the wider implications of that. So in the last couple of days, we've seen the uh, United States attack or intervention in Venezuela, where President Maduro and his wife were um, I don't know what word to use. Would they say kidnapped from from Venezuela and taken by the U.S. force, and U.S. force invading Venezuela. And before that, prior to that, we've seen a lot of U.S. Intervention attack on Venezuelan ships on the, I don't want to say, but under the guise of some kind of drug war, and the Venezuelan being involved in the drug uh, cartel, whatever, in America. But now it's something else now. Um, well, it looks like it's more a regime change. And a couple of weeks ago, we see the Trump administration, after its rhetoric um, against some sort of Christian genocide in Nigeria, carry out an attack in some kind of vague attack, because we don't have clear understanding of the outcome, what was actually targeted, if that was just a statement, what was targeted and whatnot. And the irony of that, the paradox of that, is also on the continent. Let's focus on Africa now. We've been seeing also Trump administration negotiated peace between uh, the RC and Rwanda, where we've seen where the M23 have invaded eastern Congo. And we look at that, you look at it against the backdrop of what we were talking about, the Western recession, or the retreats of Western powers and influence in Africa, especially in the Sahel, where we've seen what we saw from a couple of years ago to last year, a wave of anti-French narrative, and by extension anti-Western narrative. And so what is the implication of this? Again, under that guise, also we see Russia, we see China's influence, Russia's influence, military influence increasing in that region, providing support to military regimes that have surfaced in Mali, in Guinea, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, bolstering these military forces. And you see these military forces, especially Captain Traore in Burkina Faso, representing some kind of like anti-colonial posture or anti-neo-colonial posture, and all those kind of narratives that have been in. So what is all of this? Again, this is just shaping towards a new world order. So if you understand international relations, you understand that a new world order is preceded by a lot of chaos. So let's go back a little bit and go to about 70, 80 years back, where we had the Second World War, and how the alliance is defeated Hitler's forces, and then America emerged from that victorious, and defined international security, and defining in a way where you see where IMF was set up, International Monetary Fund, the World Banks were set up. We see where also the United Nations were set up. And America played a huge role. And then from there again, you see NATO was set up, America, because America, through the Marshall Plan, supported Europe and then the agreement, and then to provide that security guarantee to Europe. But over the time, then we saw the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union that ended somewhat in 89, early 90s, with the dissolution of Yugoslavia being the final nail in the coffin, and then the Eastern, Western Germany coming together, uniting together, and then America became the hegemon in the last of from the 90s. But from in the last 10 years or so more, we've seen a serious challenge to American hegemony. We've seen China become the formidable force in terms of being the second largest economy in the world, and its Belt and Road Initiative having a lot of impact across so many nations in the world. And that threat is again, not just China. We see Russia presenting also some sort of military threat, and against the backdrop of what's going on in Africa, for instance, where Russian forces or Russian paramilitary forces, the Wagner Group, is having a lot of influence. So what are we seeing? We're just seeing where everybody is positioning itself. Everybody is where every actions that have been taken are taken. It's just like a chess game. There's some movements. Nothing is happening just like that. But then again, what the other ironies or paradox that we see is also we see a lot of blatant attack on democracy, or what we believe was democracy or sovereignty. You see where Russia invaded Ukraine, took Crimea in 2014, and then in the last 2 years there's been a war with Ukraine, and then we see heavy condemnation from the world, from especially the Western world, and then but then again we've seen where other invasions are going on. Now, this recent United States invasion in Venezuela also then bolsters Russia's action. It doesn't challenge it, because then again it removes the moral ground, moral authority from the United States or the Western nation to challenge Russia's Russian effort in this. But nothing is just irrational. These are not irrational. This is driven by strategic interest. But underlying this is a new world order emerging, where there is stiff competition. There's a trade war going on. There are kinds of underlying tensions and diplomatic, not so diplomatic moves and attacks, where countries, supposed superpowers, are staking claim and moving goalposts and forming alliances. Especially we've seen the BRICS expanding their alliances to challenge NATO or challenge US. But again, a lot of people have commented on this, and I don't want to dwell too much on that on America's stance as the world hegemon, or the irony in terms of where Trump 2.0 claims or publicly says America first, or make America great again, or have this isolationist policy where he wants to face inwards. But then again, you see how it's positioning itself or presenting itself as interested in the affairs in South Africa. We see, for instance, when we talk about the white genocide, we saw in Nigeria, we talk about protecting the Christians. We say in Venezuela, whereby this attack is couched as protecting or saving the Venezuelan people from a dictator. But this are just superficial explanations or rationale. It's not even too deep to see that beyond capturing important resources, whether in the Congo, where we see even Rwanda forces try to capture the abundant resources in the DRC, and even the Chinese or the American or America looking at to counter China's enormous control or nearly hegemonic control of the mineral resources in Congo, and see that these conflicts. But again, let's focus on Africa and how these uh, we see in Sudan. We see where in Sudan different external forces are supporting the different parties, the RSF and the SAF, and prolonging the conflict. And then on the back end of that, you see where a lot of people are being forcefully displaced and then moving into other places and then facing this. There's also an anti-migration feeling and policies in America, be in America or in Europe. And you just look at all of that, look at how external forces, through just because of strategic interests, combined with the greed and poor leadership in Africa, leads to forced displacement of people, leads to a significant downgrade in their livelihood, and people then having to forcefully seek opportunities in these places, and how all of this combines into the world that we live in. So, but how should Africa react? Again, I don't know. It's a mixed bag with Africa. I think that the majority of African leaders are living in a bubble, living in their own world where it's all about selfish interests. Africa's not been blessed enough to have leadership that are, leaders that we've had over the time Africa's gained independence. We've had very few leaders that are visionary, that are selfless. And these African leaders have carried out some certain reforms. Do we see, like, as they say in Nigeria, for instance, in my own research, I almost studied the reforms that have become, especially again, speak on the tax reforms. These are reforms that are not internally driven. Africa, it's a rare. We've not seen in Africa where reforms that are carried out are ones that are driven. But we see Madagascar where we see the protests of the youth, but it has not led to any serious reform that are driven by that youth. But these reforms are usually externally driven. They're driven. You talk about the tax reform, you talk about the extractive industry reform, you talk about the electoral reform. These are externally driven to get either to secure aids or to get some kind of concession that the people do not benefit. We saw in Kenya where President Ruto had all these IMF World Bank economic reforms that always come with austerity measures. That always comes with anti-people policies. But I think the future of Africa, I was going to say African leaders should band, African countries should band together, Pan-Africa now. Because with this crop of leaders we have, I don't see that emerging. I don't see the EU as that very effective, or any of its regional forces very effective because it's one that is that needs to reform, and that reform needs to come for the people. The people of Africa needs African people are enlightened. The young people in Africa are waking up. But I don't think they understand these dynamics, because we've seen again where they've warmed up to the military rulers that are taking over, which shows that we've not learned from history. The military leaders in Africa have not. They've never brought prosperity or brought change. They are part of the problem, and I don't see how you can be part of the problem and then be a solution to the problem. But the African people need to rise up. The African people need to form a platform where they're able to not only challenge the ugly realities, ugly policies that are couched in reforms that are just anti-people. You see, for instance, we saw in France, in Kenya, it was the last summer where they tried to introduce the finance bill, and said the bill kicked against it. So the repressive state came against it. We're seeing it in Nigeria now, where they've just enacted as their tax law, and people do not understand the implications of this. But again, I speak about you can if you talk in a Hobbesian sense, human beings or people in a society, we have a contract with the state, and the state is supposed to have the monopoly for us, and the state is supposed to provide certain rights, certain conditions for people to thrive, and in exchange for that, you cede the authority to them. But that contract in Africa has never been provided. You tax is good. You tax when you provide the conditions for people to thrive. Well, when you provide tax in a place where people don't even have ready the more than 50%. We're talking over 100 million out of 200 million of people are in extreme poverty. They have what are you taxing? And to what benefits? And we look at some of the windfalls that have been, say, let's say from the oil subsidy that was removed, and say where are the benefits in the last 2 years? So, but let me end on this note. You'll be still shocked. I think the African people, the African youth, have a big role to play, and the way we can do it is by gaining the right knowledge, the right education. And I think one of the things that has happened in our institutions, that our institutions have become moribund, institutions have become bastardized, our institutions have become, I'm not even talking in terms of infrastructure, become derelict in terms of what we transmit to our future leaders, to the people in the continent. And we need to overhaul our educational system. We need to overhaul our knowledge system, information that we get, and how we utilize the system. We need to provide a framework where we have an educated, truly educated citizens. So from those citizens is where we are able to get real leadership, able to get genuine leadership, transparent leadership, honest leaders, leaders with integrity, leaders that care for the people, and then to be able to create a system that works for Africa. So whilst all of these things are good, Africa is becoming a playground for this to play out. So we see where attacking Venezuela is just a scheme for America to in the broader scheme of its geopolitical strategic interests. It's got little to do with the drug war. Attacking Ukraine for Putin is also part of the geostrategic interests for Russia. So as all of these people fighting, and just if we should talk about the middle powers, talk about UAE, talk about Saudi Arabia creating of these development policies in the countries, for Africa policies and all that. What is Africa doing for itself? Africa has all it takes, has the resources, has the human resources, the labor, has but again, let's go back to the education, where you see, for instance, you see in the UK, where you see a lot of people in running away from the lack of opportunities that have been created in this place. They're then forced to bring in loads of money to come and study here. And then by the time they bring loads of money, what they're doing is adding to this economy, where again, they feel, in many cases, they feel unwanted based on the anti-migrant policies, anti-migrant feelings and that are going there. And people don't really understand that it's not just about getting these degrees outside of the country. We need to fight. We need to change our orientation, and the African Union to stand up and then make demands. There should be demands. This is to be a contract with the states, with the African state, to protect the interests of this. There's no altruistic intervention. Let's not get out. Twist. A lot of people are talking about why is Trump interested in the Christians? Just why? Because again, you look at the irony. Why would Trump say he's protecting the Christians in Niger, while at the same time you are having these migration policies that are targeting these people, targeting non-whites, targeting Africans, having these tariff wars, imposing tariffs on Africans, imposing visa restrictions. So how can you on one hand be doing this and do that? So we need to have educations that imbues in the people the critical mind, the critical sense to not only decipher and understand this but also find a way to channel all of that and find a way to challenge it and create a system that works. But we live in an interesting time. We live in a very sad time, but it's an interesting time where decency no longer exists, where people can brazenly, blatantly attack sovereign nations. So we start asking, what is the sovereign nations? Because Africans never had states. What is the sovereign? Is there respect where there's no respect for sovereignty? Where the United Nations is losing its importance in its bite in protecting sovereignty. So should we start looking at, or again, even within Africa, you see, even within a nation, you see tribalism, you see ethnic politics, see all of these fighting identity wars, identity issues that are brewing and that affecting. So, what progress have we made so far as humans? So, well, I'll leave it there and say the future of Africa is in the hands of the people, and the people need to really fight to protect that future because Africa don't want to be the pawn in the geopolitical competition for hegemony. So Africa needs to look for a way from whatever level to form alliances and alignments that's going to protect its interests. But by and large, I don't think the crop of leaders that we have the interests of the people of the continent in the mind. So the people need to come up with, but that has to be internally driven. That has to generate from within. And I wish that Africa can reach that level where it does that to protect the future generations and protect its resources and protect its wealth and be able to administer in a way and share because it's an abundant way in a way that is respectful with others, in a way that is fair and in a way that is equitable. For now, I'll leave it at that.